All right. Well, welcome back from lunch, everybody. Hopefully, you got to go outside and smell some grass and be in the sun and get out of your office for a couple moments. But we're gonna before we jump into this next session with Mindy, just a couple things to go over real quick with you. As far as our leaderboard in terms of the points for the conference, right now we've got in first place, staying strong, 355 points, Tracy Raymond. At 345 points, we've got Marlene Finch Bridge. We've got Drew in third place at 345. We've got Madeline in fourth at 330 points. And then we've got Claudia at 285 points. So again, make sure you keep following up and reviewing each session, that you're looking for items in the scavenger hunt, that you're interacting with our sponsors. And so just another encouragement to go to the booths for our sponsors. Exact GPS is here, and they're here to answer any questions that you have. And so reach out to them, as well as Daryl Lynch. And so a couple, let's see. One, actually, I thought I had something else. I don't. So let's jump right into it. So we've got Mindi Blanchard here. She's going to be speaking for the next session. Mindi Blanchard found Bridge Builders Ltd. in 2003 as a certified professional guardian agency located on the North Olympic Peninsula. The agency currently consists of 3 certified professional guardians, an office manager, and a bookkeeper. In 2013, she founded the Guardian Institute to create a venue to support and assist professional and lay guardians with the challenges of guardianship. Over the years, she's provided presentations at Washington conferences, the National Guardianship Association conferences, as well as the World Conference on Adult Guardianship in 2014, and then the World Conference on Adult Capacity held in Scotland in 2021. She strives to help improve the perception of professional guardians within our community, and with great pleasure, I have a chance to pass it over here to Mindi.
Thank you, Luke. And I want to tell everybody that to please thank Luke for all his hard work, because this wouldn't happen without him. I just do not have the time anymore to put this stuff together early on. My office staff and I did it all, but our business has grown and I just haven't had the time, and Luke's been wonderful about jumping in and getting and putting this all together, and I hardly have to think twice about it. So now for my presentation, what I learned from being sued, an illustration of how a frivolous lawsuit can blindside a person, but more importantly, how to survive it and thrive through the aftermath. This is Hale et al. Versus Bridge Builders Limited. One day I received a call from an attorney. He said that a couple had come to them regarding their powers of attorney, because they said to change their power of attorney because they said their adult children had moved them from their home into assisted living, and they were concerned that the adult children might be financially exploiting them. I said that I would go to the assisted living facility where they were currently living and talk with them. The couple told me that their adult children had tricked them into moving into the assisted living facility. Evidently, according to them, the husband, first it was the husband, and he had been told he had a doctor's appointment, hadn't realized where they were, and next thing he knew, he was left at the facility. And then several weeks later, his wife, who had been visiting for lunches, the family brought her in for lunch and moved her in without her knowledge. And they were both left. He did not have his wallet. He had no money. He had no ID. She did not have her purse. And even her daughter, she said, had, prior to moving her in there, had said, "Hey, Mom, can I have your rings? I'll go get them cleaned for you." And she never saw them after that. I talked with the acting administrator of the assisted living facility. The actual administrator was on vacation. She said that there was an open a complaint against the adult children, and that the husband had called an attorney and was going to actually walk to the appointment, but the facility paid for the taxi just due to safety concerns. I met with a couple and explained again how I work as power of attorney, and they agreed to hire me as to be their power of attorney. I left and called the attorney and let them know that I was willing to be their power of attorney. A day later, the attorney contacted me and said he had the documents drawn up, and asked if I would review them with the couple. So I picked up the documents and went to the assisted living and literally read the powers of attorney to the couple. They approved them, so I left the documents with the couple and called the attorney, relaying the couple's agreement. The attorney later that day went in and had them sign them and notarize them and everything. The couple then asked me to take them to the bank. The bank was less than a mile away, so I agreed and took them to the bank. They conferred with the customer service representative while I sat in a chair out of hearing. Evidently, they removed their adult children from access to their accounts. They wanted to move back home, so I arranged for a caregiving agency to provide caregivers when they moved home. On the day of the move, when I arrived at the assisted living facility, I was told that one of the adult children had arrived earlier and was basically holding the couple hostage in the room. APS had been called but had not arrived. After conferring with the administrator and the caregiving agency supervisor, this caregiving agency supervisor and I left. I heard later that it was several hours before the APS worker arrived. By that time, the couple had recanted everything, so there wasn't anything anybody could do, and we all backed out. The amount of time I was involved was 9 days. So a few days later, it was a Saturday, but I was working in my office. The two men came to the door and they said that they were sons of the couple and wanted to talk to me. And I said they could make an appointment on Monday. They refused, one saying that he lived out of state and would not be there on Monday. But I was about to let two men who I didn't know into my office when I was there alone. Sometime later, and now I can't remember the actual timeline, but I received a complaint from the Department of Health. The adult children had filed a complaint saying I was doing business as an unlicensed caregiving agency. I responded to the complaint and included what little documentation that I had. An investigator came from the health department and arrived for an interview. Ultimately, the investigator was satisfied that my business was not acting as an unlicensed caregiving agency. He said driving them to the bank once did not constitute being a caregiving agency. They were able to confirm that I had arranged for agency caregivers upon the couple's return, because the complaint was that my staff and I were going to provide that care directly, and they were complaining that because I gave them a ride in my car, that it went against the laws regarding having a caregiving agency. So a few weeks after that, I received a call from my business attorney, and I don't have anybody on retainer. He just files my corporate reports every year. That's all he does. Saying that he'd been served a complaint by the family. I picked up the document from the attorney's office and called my liability insurance company. They asked if I wanted to have them find an attorney to represent us. I said yes. The complaint was almost word for word the complaint submitted to the Department of Health. They listed as defendants me, my dead husband, Brenda, her husband, and also the acting administrator of the assisted living facility and the attorney who drew up the power of attorney. I sat down with Brenda to find out how she felt about the situation, because she could have decided to quit. She and I agreed that I had done nothing wrong and that we would fight the lawsuit. So I notified our insurance company. Brenda and I talked with the attorney assigned to us. The attorney immediately wanted to negotiate a settlement. What I've learned is these attorneys, you live and learn. That's what the insurance company wants them to do, is just negotiate a settlement. I was adamant. I'd done nothing wrong, and I did not want to negotiate a settlement. This was an issue that continued through the process. Then out of nowhere, nothing happened. And we found out that it was because the attorney for the plaintiff had been sanctioned by the Bar Association and lost his license for 18 months. So we just had to wait. Once the proceedings started again, our attorney was again wanting to settle. I said I was unwilling to settle because I hadn't done anything wrong. And more importantly, the plaintiff's attorney made it very clear that they wanted to put me out of business. They didn't want to settle either. They weren't interested in settling, and it took having the plaintiff's attorney saying that to my attorney's face to get him to understand this. Then came the depositions. The plaintiffs were deposed first, but it ended quickly as two of the three plaintiffs emotionally fell apart during the questioning. When it was my turn to be deposed, it was an entire day. The plaintiff's attorney seemed to have found every legal document that had been filed at the courthouse with my name on it. He would flip through them, purposely positioning them so I could see the names on them. And he would watch me to gauge my reaction each time. And I thought it was odd, but I never had been deposed before. The plaintiff attorney did everything he could to make me upset, defensive, angry, and humiliated. He shot questions at me so fast that I could barely say yes or no before he shot the next one at me. The plaintiffs also deposed Brenda and the acting administrator of the assisted living facility. The plaintiffs had reached a settlement with the attorney who had drawn up the power of attorney. So we finally had the hearing in Superior Court, and the summary judgment sided with us. The plaintiff's attorney immediately said that they would appeal, and we had to wait for them to file their pleadings and wait for our attorney to file ours, of course, and wait for it was a lot of waiting, wait for the court hearing, which was in Tacoma. So here's the appeal. Our attorney said we didn't need to attend the appeals court hearing, but it was my business and my future at stake. So Brenda and I attended. We were very glad that we did. The plaintiff attorney gave his argument, which was the same as he gave Superior Court. Then the judges started asking him about standing. It took me a bit to catch on, but what they were questioning was whether the plaintiffs had standing for bringing the case in the first place. The judges asked if there had been any documentation showing that the individuals the plaintiffs had power of attorney for were incompetent. The plaintiffs had nothing because the couple were very competent. They had physical issues, but they were very competent. There were other points in the lawsuit that the judges questioned as well, but this one really stood out to Beacon to me, simply because if our attorney had looked at the complaint for cause instead of just being so quick to settle, we may have been able to nip this whole thing in the bud. I don't know, because these people were pretty determined to keep the litigation going as long as possible, but I think it would have shortened it, definitely. So ultimately, the appellate court ruled in our favor, and the plaintiffs had filed an appeal with the Supreme Court, who refused. Of course, it was another waiting game, but ultimately they refused to hear it. So before the Superior Court hearing, WAPIG, who put out newsletters at the time, published a newsletter regarding guardians and lawsuits. They suggested that Hale et al. Versus Bridge Builders Limited was a guardianship lawsuit and strongly implied we were guilty. I demanded an apology and was refused, but they did allow me to write a response, which, after conferring with my attorney, I did. They printed it, but also included an editorial comment, again suggesting that Bridge Builders Limited was guilty. I again complained, but received no response. I want to footnote that what happened was over 10 years ago. This happened over 10 years ago, and I feel that the current board has much more integrity. But this is what happened during that time. And just to backpedal a bit, one of the adult Hale children was an attorney who grew up around here. I believe he went to law school here in this state because the attorney he had to represent us was an old school chum. They didn't make it. They didn't even try to hide that. And I suspect he had something to do with getting another attorney friend to write that article. Of course, I'll never know, but so, and then still there's a pleading by the plaintiffs on the internet marked unpublished opinion, which is totally erroneous, making bridge builders out to be guilty. Of course, anybody can put anything on the internet. There was never an opinion published or unpublished because the Supreme Court refused to hear the case. However, there isn't anything that can be done about it. And then we started getting numerous phone calls asking about caregiving services. We never provided caregiving services, so we're very suspicious that it was an attempt to catch us as providing caregiving services. But it didn't end there. We thought it was done for, but a few months later, the same plaintiff attorney filed a lawsuit against us representing a past guardianship client. Remember when I talked about the attorney flipping through court documents in such a way I could see the names during the deposition? Well, this ex-client was one that was shown to me while the plaintiff watched to see my reaction. This guardianship client had moved out of the county, and we had transferred the guardianship to a guardian in the other county. Just to let you know, a lot of our clients are challenging clients, but there are very few that I would say that I've had that were absolutely vile. This client was absolutely vile. I was so glad when she decided to move out of the county. Evidently, somehow this past guardianship client had gotten the guardianship removed, and the plaintiff's attorney found her. Now, there was some speculation that the plaintiff's attorney may have had something to do with getting the guardianship removed, but there's no way to prove anything. The client, who was very low income, seemed to think she would get a lot of money out of the lawsuit. I know this because an ex-client came in my office, had moved back to Clallam County because that's where the lawsuit was filed. And she came into my office bragging about it and really using bullying tactics. We had to call the police. Then I let my attorney know, who obviously let her attorney know, and that kind of stopped it. But in this case, we happened to get paid by an insurance company, a third party. So, and not with client assets. So that even made the case even more frivolous. But this time I called a lawyer, someone who was also a CPGC, and asked for the name of a law firm that could represent us. That attorney was great, and we won the summary judgment once we had the Superior Court hearing. The plaintiff attorney again voiced his intent to appeal. My attorney said the lawsuit was so obviously frivolous that we could petition to have the plaintiff pay our attorney's fees, which we did. Then when the plaintiff attorney was served those documents, he immediately wanted to settle, and we were able to demand the order to be with prejudice, meaning they couldn't file again. So from start to finish, it took about 5 years, because this is never quick and easy. Now, Luke, I'm going to say, for some reason, I am not seeing any chat on my computer. So if you could help with that, if there are some questions, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, the chat is open. I just don't think anyone is contributed to the
Okay.
chat yet.
Okay, I just didn't know because I couldn't tell. Oh, there's something here.
Oh, there we go.
Except I can't seem to.
Yep. So Linda said, sounds nightmarish. Jason said your story was captivating. Teresa shared, we all are just listening to this story. Jason Hill said, lost for words.
Well, I
Lots,
had to get
lots
through the story in order to get to the learning part of it. But it was very difficult. It was a very difficult situation. I had just kind of gotten over the hump of going through a period of time where the business was in really bad shape. Um, I had started the business with a business partner. We both made, we were naive. We didn't know what we were doing. We both made um, mistakes and used some poor judgment. And after 4 years, she left. The business was in terrible shape financially. But I had caught the passion of this business and I wanted to make it a success. And with the help of a business advisor and some wonderful employees, we really were able to work our way back. And we just kind of started getting over that hump when we were hit with this lawsuit. Again, um, the Hales were determined. They knew they didn't have a case. I came to that conclusion because one of the Hales, the one that wasn't an emotional wreck, was actually an attorney, and I think he knew that he didn't have standing to begin with. They just wanted to try and keep the litigation going as long as possible, to try to put me out of business. And as time went on, they were very vocal about that. They kept saying you don't deserve to be in business, stuff like that. So I had, on top of trying to pull my business out of almost bankruptcy, to be hit with this was really a tough time. But I did a lot of self-work on it, and I had a lot of emotional support from the people around me. And I want to share what I learned because this is such a highly litigious business that we're in. Frankly, our whole country is highly litigious. Could be the whole world is highly litigious anymore. But because there are huge liability risks, and we have to work at trying to mitigate that as much as possible. And this really helped me build a business backbone, this whole experience. And I was fortunate in the people who were working for me at the time because they really stood behind me as well. So lesson one is any business has its liability risks. And we live in a litigious society where anybody can sue anybody for anything. Lawsuits happen in the most surprising ways, or even grievances. You can even talk about grievances or APS reports or whatever. I don't know about you, but when it comes to grievances or APS reports, so often they're just stupid. I'm just amazed at what triggers it. And it's typically the people who have no money, at least from my experience. It's more of a power play, and it's not even always from family, because I've had it happen from a business manager at a skilled nursing facility, filed a grievance with the guardian board because of a permanent that we said my client couldn't afford right then. that's what I find most of these, because if you're in this line of business, you're going to get a grievance. Somebody's going to call APS. That's just the way it is. And they're oftentimes on these silly kinds of things. But it never occurred to me at the time that I'd be sued for being involved with clients for 9 days and I never got paid. I never even asked for payment, which was a really smart move on my part. I found out later. So, but these plaintiffs were out for revenge. Luke, could you read some more of the chats? Because for some reason, I can't seem to get them to work. I can't seem to reach them.
Sure. Yep, just lots of empathizing, lost for words, this story, how awful, lost for words, I agree. We are stunned, Mindy. And let's see, so Elizabeth says, Mindy, you're providing us a great example of how to stand up to a frivolous lawsuit. I'm sorry this happened to you and your colleagues. Mindy, did your guardianship insurance E&O company ever make a payout on your behalf? Lost wages?
Not lost wages. I mean, they paid the attorney who represented me on both of them, the attorneys who represented me, and then promptly the company that I was using at the time promptly dropped me. So then I had to, for several years, I had to get this high risk insurance until they decided we were safe for getting normal liability insurance. And that's just part of it. So lesson 2 is that, just to let you know, the laws regarding what constitutes a caregiver are extremely broad. And this is what I learned from my interview with the investigator from the Department of Health. They almost invite complaints. Most of you know about the Guardianship Services of Seattle and the case they lost because they used independent caregivers instead of a caregiving agency. And it was lost on it, if you ask me, and I'm not an attorney, but if you ask me, it was lost on a technicality because of the broadness of these laws. Because of the case if there's any of you who are not familiar with it, is they had caregivers staying with a woman with Alzheimer's, and the caregivers were given permission to sleep at the foot of the bed at night. Well, one night, somehow, and we all know people with dementia can be awfully sneaky. The woman got up, managed to open the window and fell to her death. And the rep of the estate then filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Guardianship Services. According to the lawsuit, using privately hired caregivers puts us in a supervisory position, which can be construed as being an unlicensed caregiving agency. Would they have sued if it had been a licensed caregiving agency and the same thing happened? Possibly. Would the outcome be any different? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But it's silly, if you ask me, but this is the way these laws are. And I just want you to be aware that driving somebody, if you're in the habit of driving clients places, unless you have transportation insurance, you want to really rethink that. We try very hard not to transport clients. We're in a rural area. Transportation sometimes isn't readily available. And so I just write into when I renew my liability insurance, I just explain we're in a rural area. We try very hard not to transport clients, but we do have an occasional exception to that. So I want you to be really aware of that. Are there any other?
Yeah, so I mean, and this kind of goes along with a lot of what you had shared, but I'm just going to read it in case there's anything missing. So Amber said, Mindy, was your expenses that you had to absorb as is related to defending? Were there expenses that you had to absorb as as it is related to defending yourself? And did you have to file any claims via your insurance? This is one of my major fears as a CBGC, and I'm just curious what the financial impact was and how you overcame that. I know you covered a lot of that, but
Yeah, well, our deductible at the time was $5,000, and we had to pay that deductible. Of course, we lost, we lost whatever we could make doing client services because we were busy dealing with the lawsuits for those periods of time. So yes, it was a struggle that way. Now, I don't know if anybody can get liability insurance now that has a $5,000 deductible. I mean, mine I think is 15,000 now, but yeah, there's still an impact. But if we hadn't have had it, they would have been successful in putting me out of business, no question. So I really advocate that in this line of work, anybody who does it, I don't care whether you're managing money or not. Again, we weren't managing money. This had nothing to do with money. This had to do with vengeance, and primarily with this one attorney sibling. The other two were just doing what he told them to do. Lesson 3, whether or not you qualify for and I kind of touched on this, whether or not you qualify for an exemption of liability insurance. If you ask me, it's really important to have it. You just need to, this type of business, you just can't afford not to have it. Because the plaintiffs would have been successful in putting me out of business otherwise. Lesson 4, should you get sued, do not let your insurance find an attorney for you. I was so frustrated with this insurance hired attorney. He was a nice guy. I just didn't feel like he was motivated into to really supporting us. And especially when I went through the deposition, he just sat there and said nothing while this guy's shooting these questions at me, one right after the other. Now, I did okay with it. I'm not complaining about that, but I thought it would have been his job, just for a power thing, to slow the guy down, to just make a point. You can't treat my client this way. But he just said nothing. Are there some other comments, Luke? Because for whatever reason, I cannot get a mouse onto the screen.
Sorry, I was talking to myself. I was muted. Yeah, there were quite a few comments, and so I don't know if I'll have time to go through all of them, but here's a few key ones. So Jamie had shared, facilities are continually asking us to do more and more with our clients, including transporting people who need care. We tell them we are not trained or licensed caregivers. It's becoming an issue because facilities do not want to send caregivers to appointments outside of the building. I'd love to hear some solutions to being pulled into place where an allegation can arise. I'm always worried what would happen if something happens while we're driving a client to a medical appointment.
Yeah, we've gotten so we absolutely refuse. It's, either we figure out a way to have a doctor who will come to the facility, or we set up the client with paratransit and either ride with them in paratransit or meet them at the doctor's appointment. But we've gotten so, like I say, we have like one client that's an exception because we've had him for a long time, but he had traumatic brain injury. He does not play well with others, but he does perfectly fine with us. But once or twice a year, he has to see the doctor. We can't use paratransit because if anything changes, he'd just have a fit and intimidate people. And he's not physically violent, but he can be intimidating if you're not used to him. And so we will take him to, this doctor appointment once or twice a year. That's it. So, but I think there's a big problem all the way around, because just recently, a caregiving agency that used to take, actually, a caregiver who used to take this particular client once a week to run his errands, has been told she can no longer take him. So I think the laws tightening up even with caregiving agencies. So it's going to be a real, it's going to be a real problem. But what I do, what I think we need to do as guardians is really push back. We are not caregivers. We are not transportation. So we need to say we need to work together to figure this out. Because I think it's a liability issue for the facility. It's a liability issue for caregiving agencies. And there used to be some sort of exemption for caregiving agencies as long as the caregiver had a certain level of insurance. But I don't think I think they've tightened up on that recently. Can you read a few more, Luke?
Sure. So one person asked, is E&O different than liability?
No, that's the same.
Okay. Elizabeth, or let's see, Claire shared, I totally agree with the attorney issue, Mindy. They are there to essentially save costs and settlement as the first option usually. I would never use one any more than I would use a contractor referred to by my homeowner's insurance. Erna shared, DSHS allows a mileage reimbursement for AFHs or SNFs. Most AFHs are also avoiding the liability. So HopeLink it is. Laura shared, we meet them at the appointment. And then Debbie had said, what companies are CPGs using for professional liability insurance? And so we've got a number who've added to that. But we had one question from Rebecca saying, how does the liability work when you also have an HCA license, but you are an IP and in CPG?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. I'd have to talk to the insurance. I would suggest you talk to the insurance company and just kind of lay it all out and have them, um, say what parts of it they'll cover. In the way of insurance companies, I use Dominion Insurance. I don't know if there's even any other insurance that will do error and omissions insurance for guardians anymore.
Chick shared, I have taken my client out for a Starbucks date once a month. Does that not make me a caregiver?
I can't tell you, but I'm just saying you have to be cautious. You have to be cautious.
Yeah, and lots of just comments on insurance companies. Debbie shared, we also need to notify insurance if there's a CPGC complaint report. And that is mostly it.
Right. And if they're talking about, I think she's probably talking about a grievance. And I've had that happen. You let your insurance company know. And especially if you know it's just a frivolous thing, I don't think that anything's going to happen to this, and that they'll just say, well, let us know if it does, but they take it down. And if nothing happens with it, then it just goes away. So just because you have to report it to your insurance does not mean that all of a sudden you're going to get a ding against that. Having done that, it's only if it turns into something that they have to expend energy on, I think. But yeah. And lesson 5, being a business owner is very difficult emotionally. It's very important to deal with and resolve personal emotional issues related to any kinds of feelings of inadequacy regarding yourself or your business. I don't know, I've been doing this over 20 years now, and I still have my sleepless nights where I'm thinking I must have done something wrong and something's going to come back to bite me. And I've just learned that those are just feelings unless somebody comes out and points something out to me. And I just need to keep moving forward and not, you know, be cautious, but not stop everything because I think something's wrong. But I've had many, many times thinking, I feel like I've done something wrong, but I don't know who to ask to find out, you know? And I'm sure we've all felt that way sometimes. But I had a lot of emotional baggage prior to this lawsuit just because of the what I went through with the business issues prior to that. Because again, you know, before I started the business, I never had debt. That's just the way I lived my life. And then I got this business partner, and at the time, credit was easy. And if people kept saying, "Oh, you know, if you just do this, you'll have more business than you know what to do with," and we do that, and that didn't work. And well, you know, if you just do this other, then you'd have more business than you know what to do with, and we try that, and it wouldn't work. And instead of not listening to them and focusing on learning how to run a business, we were listening to all these other people and taking some very bad advice and making some very poor decisions. And you know, and I'm going to share with you at the worst, my business was over $200,000 in debt. I'm very proud to say that's been all paid off, long paid off. So, you know, it did turn over, but I had a lot of guilt about that. I had a lot of shame, personal shame about it, because I felt like I was so stupid to have gotten myself in that place in the first place. And I had to realize that at this end of things, I can't judge myself for the decisions I made back then because I didn't have the knowledge that I have now. And for those of you who are new, I think it's really important to understand that is, don't beat yourself up. Um, and I had to resolve that. And if I hadn't done that, I would have never made it through that deposition. But because I could sit through that deposition in a position of feeling comfortable within myself, because obviously this plaintiff attorney had gotten hold of my past business partner and had some knowledge that the business had been in bad financial straits. That came out in the deposition. And, you know, so he was really trying to, you know, get me off foot and get me on the defensive. But I'd done all that emotional work, and it didn't work. You know, but he was the kind, he even said, my husband was a disabled vet. But you know, at the very end, he even tried to say that I had married my husband because I was a gold digger. And it's like, are you kidding me? That's not quite what I said, but you know, I just said we were married. We were a team. This had nothing to do with any, you know. But he tried everything. He tried as much as he could. And of course, here's this attorney, this insurance hired attorney sitting there like a bump on the log, who could have done a far better job to at least just support me. So, you know, being a business owner and learning how to run a business, it's hard. Any business, but I think particularly this one, because we have people who are dependent on us. And that's what I always looked at when things go rough, is I have these people who are dependent on me. I've got to figure this out, because I don't want to abandon them. Um, and so, you know, that's really important. And if any of you are going through that right now, here's what it was. The first thing I did was I went to the Small Business Development Council and talked to a business advisor. And she really did a lot to help me. Not in the, well, she helped me figure out strategy, but just the emotional support helped so much. And my staff, who was willing to hang in there with me, That was a lot of emotional support. Um, so you want to make sure that you're going to run into business challenges. Even now with bridge builders, we're kind of going through a bit of a growth spurt, and that always makes money a little tight and things like that. And fortunately, I just last Saturday I stopped in because my bookkeeper works on Saturday, and we had a talk about, okay, how are we going to manage this tightness of the funds until we get past the flow and get back into the flow of things and things like that. So it's important to have the right people around you. In business, you have to know what your weaknesses are. My weakness is I am not a numbers person. So don't ask me to try to keep track of everybody's money, because I probably end up curled up underneath the desk crying. Um, I've always had a bookkeeper working for me because of that. Now I know globally about my clients. I know what each client, generally speaking, what they have, what the outgo is, what their needs are going to be, what step I need. I know that part, but don't ever ask me to sit down and write checks and track all that stuff, because I just can't. That's just not my thing. So have the right people, to support you on that. Lesson 6. I'm not even sure where are we?
We've got another 10 minutes, and just
Okay.
sitting on in the chat, there's been lots of good conversation.
Do you want to do
No
you
specific questions towards you though.
Okay. And then lesson 6, one thing I learned, what really struck me is appropriate documentation is a key in this business for protecting ourselves. I was not good at documentation, but what struck me was what little documentation I did helped so much in the whole process, that I went back to my employees and said, we need to do better. Going forward, we need to do this. So, and during the ensuing years, a copious documentation that we do, and it takes time to get it all down, but it's well worth it, because you know, sometimes there are these family members who give us grief during the first 90 days. And when they see that their phone conversations and behaviors are documented in a very objective way, not calling them names or anything like that, or drawing conclusions, just saying this is what happened and this is how I handled it. After they realize their behavior has been exposed, they seem to disappear. Not always, but most of the time. There are those family members or friends who just think they're entitled to act the way they do, and that's an ongoing annoyance. I actually had somebody in my office. Brenda and I are kind of this team in the way that she's very smooth talker. She can most often soothe the savage beast. So I always send her in first. And if the savage beast isn't going to be soothed or smooth, ugh, can't even talk now. If they can't get calmed down or anything, then I step in because I'm not as nice. And one time we had a situation where this guy was just chasing her around in circles, and I said, okay, I'm pulling the boss card here. I'll take care of him. And the next time he called, I just very, very politely said, Brenda's not available. What can I do for you? Well, he said, I don't want to talk to you. I only want to talk with Brenda. I said, Brenda is not available. And he said, you can't do that. And I said, yes, I can. And he actually told me that that was illegal. And I almost laughed in his ear. But he went away. He then said, well, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want you writing me. I don't want you emailing me. I don't want to hear from you at all. I said, I'm okay with that. And we never heard from him again. So sometimes they're a little bit amusing, but we try very hard to work with our clients, but occasionally you get these very difficult ones. And lesson 7 being the best karma is just to live your life and run your business. And I truly think that for these people who sued us, it just fries them that I'm still in business this, more than 10 years later, and have a great reputation in our community. But focusing on what happened or wanting revenge, it keeps you from moving forward. You just need to keep moving forward, and keep working towards trying to be the best person you can in your business. So if any of you are struggling that way, feel free to call me, contact me, um, because I know every business goes through difficult times. That's just the way it is. And it's hard enough being a guardianship business, um, if under general principles, but we need to be supporting each other in this and helping each other get past the hard times. Are there any other questions, Luke?
Yeah, we just had a thought from Jacob. He said, let's see, let's make sure. It said, if your driver got into a car accident, let's make sure I'm not missing any context, which I think I might be. So, no specific questions to you. Sorry about that.
Nothing about that driver getting into a car accident?
Well, I can read it, but there was context to it prior to that. So,
Oh,
um, so it was a conversation that was happening in the chat with a question mark, and I saw, oh, there's a question mark, but it wasn't directed towards you.
oh, okay.
Uh,
Any other questions or anything? I did include my contact information. And number 8, practice self-compassion. Don't judge yourself for something you did in the past with the knowledge you have now. And my personal motto is, if I'm wrong, I will bend over backward to fix it. But if someone tries to attack me or my business, I will fight back, and I will make it hurt as much as possible. Um, and I've had the opportunity to do that a couple times. But I have another motto, and you can't see it behind me, but it says, be the kind of woman that when your feet hit the floor, the devil says, oh crap, she's up. And with that, I will end.